In the midst of Sean Diddy Combs' ongoing federal trial, a new narrative has crashed into the spotlight. And this one doesn't just circle around Diddy, it's about legacy, about inheritance, about power, quietly passed down like a shadowy dynasty, his sons. Justin and Christian Combs weren't just being raised under the glare of hip-hop royalty, they were allegedly being groomed not to run a music label, not to launch fashion lines, but to inherit the very structure that Diddy built behind closed doors. Now with court testimonies dropping bombshell after bombshell and federal agents raiding multi-million-dollar homes, questions are exploding. What did the sons know? And more importantly, how long have they been entangled? Because if what Cassie Ventura just hinted at is true, this goes far deeper than anyone imagined in front of a packed courtroom. She cracked open a timeline that spanned over a decade, exposing what life was like behind the velvet curtain of Diddy's empire. But beneath the personal chaos and tightly controlled image.
Bill and Sade, accepting a plea agreement would mean that Sean Combs would have to admit to trafficking and forced. And today he made it very clear that was not going to happen. Diddy maintained all along these encounters involved consenting adults and plans to take his chances that a jury agrees.
Well, it's not up to me. It's up to Mr. Combs, and I don't see it happening.
Why?
Because he believes he's innocent. He believes he's innocent. And what's more, he believes that he needs to stand up, not just for himself, for his family, and for everybody who's been targeted by the federal government.
Her words suggested something even more calculated: infrastructure. Cassie described feeling monitored not just by Diddy, but by the individuals surrounding him. She claimed there were layers of handlers, assistants, enforcers. And at the center, Diddy orchestrating it all. But then came the subtle shift, a name drop, a moment that sent waves rippling out from the testimony. She recalled moments where Christian Combs was present, not just as a bystander, but as someone being brought in to observe how things functioned. That detail hit hard because it fed into the new theory swirling around the case that Diddy wasn't just living recklessly, he was building a dynasty, training his heirs, giving his sons the playbook. Cassie didn't lay it out explicitly. She didn't need to. The implication was enough, and it's the kind of implication that turns a courtroom drama into a multi-generational headline. And this was just the beginning. Dawn Richards' appearance in the courtroom wasn't anticipated, but the moment she stepped up.
They came inside the courtroom, and again, this was after Diddy was already sitting down at the defense table. He looked back immediately, he smiled, he beamed up, he waved at at his two sons, and just kind of gave them like kind of a little bit of, it's a good to see you type of feeling. That's what I was gathering from inside that courtroom. Now, again, I want to remind our viewers that when we're inside federal court, again, there's no cameras, which Jesse, I'm sure you have already mentioned that part, but even for us journalists, with the exception of some who get a special permission of that, we just are relying on a notebook, a notepad, a pen, a pencil in order to kind of take notes to see what is all going on. I can't even take my Apple Watch inside that courtroom whenever there's a hearing. I have to turn that in. I have to turn my laptop in. Of course, I have to turn my phone in. So we're kind of just eye-watching everything that's going on. Now, when Christian and Justin came inside that courtroom, they were actually sitting just right across from me over on the left side of the gallery. So what I was seeing from both of his sons was a little bit of leg shaking, what I perceived to be a little prayer right before the hearing had actually started as well too. But again, I think their focus was maintaining a good face for their father, being supportive of their father, which you expect at this point because they've attended pretty much all of the hearings so far, with the exception of that emergency hearing that happened, I believe, back in October now. But then they kind of just stood and sat and just kind of listened to what was all kind of happening. Again, that court hearing was pretty quick. It was about 30 minutes long. I think all of us were kind of surprised that the hearing did last that short amount of time as opposed to last hearing, which was about 2 hours or so.
Tone shifted. This wasn't just another celebrity trying to distance themselves from the controversy. This was someone who had existed in the orbit of Diddy's inner circle and saw what most never did. A former member of Danity Kane, Dawn, had been handpicked by Diddy himself. She was there during the peak of his media domination, navigating through the day-to-day of the empire like a silent observer, and what she shared confirmed what many had feared. Cassie wasn't alone. Dawn detailed moments where tension wasn't just in the space. It was the space she described how Diddy allegedly operated with a constant need to monitor and control his environment. Staff didn't act unless given directives, phones were collected, conversations were screened. Loyalty wasn't suggested, it was demanded. And within that world, Dawn revealed that she saw Diddy's sons particularly. Justin frequently positioned nearby, not just as casual family members tagging along. They were present during critical moments. Closed-door meetings, late-night gatherings, phone calls that ended with nervous assistants scrambling to follow up. It was all subtle but deliberate. Dawn's testimony painted a picture of young men not just watching, but learning, observing how things were managed, how people were controlled, and how loyalty was tested. And here's the kicker. Dawn admitted that at the time she didn't think much of it, but in hindsight she said it felt like a training ground. That one-phrase training ground is now ricocheting across every entertainment blog and courtroom summary because, if true, it suggests something far more orchestrated. This wasn't a music mogul with a chaotic personal life. This was someone allegedly laying the foundation for a legacy that stretched into the next generation, and what came out next added even more fuel. When the footage dropped, it spread like wildfire. Armored vehicles outside the Miami and Los Angeles mansions, agents in full tactical gear swarming the properties. Helicopters overhead. But what caught everyone's attention wasn't just the overwhelming force used. It was who walked out of those gates. They weren't just visiting. They weren't at a friend's house. They were inside the very properties being raided by federal agents, and for many watching, that was the moment the rumor shifted into something far more chilling. These weren't boys unaware of their father's world. These were young men who had been by his side publicly and privately for years. Red carpets, music videos, lavish vacations, parties with A-listers, brand launches. But now they were on the front lines of a federal investigation. When agents moved in, Christian was reportedly escorted out in athletic wear. Visibly calm, Justin followed, hands up, complying silently. No resistance, no confusion, just quiet submission to a moment that would haunt headlines for weeks. But what caught people off guard was what happened after. According to leaked intel from sources close to the investigation, both sons were questioned separately. And although they weren't detained or arrested, the sheer fact that they were on site during a federal raid across both coasts raised one obvious question. Why were they so deeply embedded if this was just a lifestyle, lavish parties, private jets, and designer clothes? Why were they in the buildings that agents were storming? Some believe Diddy kept them close, simply because they were family. Others, their connecting dots suggesting these appearances were never coincidental, that they'd been placed there deliberately to learn, to watch, to manage. Because the truth is, if you're building an empire and want to keep it going, you don't train strangers, you train blood. And with that theory now fueling headlines, everyone started digging deeper into the timeline. When did this alleged grooming really start? And that's exactly what the next section explores. How early signs may have always been hiding in plain sight. This is where the narrative shifts, from chaos to calculation. Because once you look back, not with blinders but with context, there's a pattern that's hard to ignore. Diddy didn't just raise his sons in luxury, he raised them like apprentices. He paraded them across stages, positioned them in front-row business meetings, and handed them opportunities most people only dream of. But those opportunities came with exposure to everything. Let's start with Christian Combs. Built as the next big thing in hip-hop, he was signed to Bad Boy Records before he even turned 20. But what's striking isn't the music, it's the messaging. Christian's image was crafted to mirror his father's flashy suits, private jets, swagger-heavy interviews, even his nickname, King Combs. That's not subtle. That's succession planning. Justin Combs, on the other hand, wasn't pushed toward music. He was polished, educated, a UCLA football player. But behind that pristine image was a young man with deep access to the empire. He was frequently photographed at high-level business dinners with Diddy, sat front and center at Revolt events. He even appeared in now viral clips being introduced to influential execs and foreign investors. Neither son has ever publicly claimed to be taking over anything, but the implication is screaming louder than ever. Insiders, many of whom remained anonymous, have whispered for years that Diddy didn't believe in outside hires. He believed in legacy, and those closest to him said he wanted his empire, both the front-facing businesses and whatever might exist behind the scenes, to stay in the family. There are now reports circulating that Christian was regularly flown into exclusive gatherings with industry elites, not music shoots, strategy meetings, brand deals, partnership, contracts, even hush-hush conversations about how to handle bad press. And Justin? He was allegedly looped into decision-making moments, involving PR damage control and finance ops. And he wasn't just sitting in the room. He was talking. Sources have even begun speculating that certain mentor figures were placed around the sons over the years. People who weren't stylists, coaches, or managers, but handlers. Discreet figures with clean public records and vague job titles. Always nearby, always watching. It's painting a picture that doesn't look accidental. It looks strategic. So now people are going back, scrubbing old interviews, rewatching reality show cameos, looking for signs. Any signs that Justin and Christian were being molded into more than celebrities. Because if Diddy was building a dynasty, he didn't need to say it out loud. He just needed to plant the seed. And what fans are discovering next, especially in public appearances and subtle red carpet quotes, is blowing this wide open. Once the theory caught fire, the public response wasn't subtle. It was explosive. Fans started digging comment sections lit up with side-by-side photos, comparing Diddy's poses to Christian's, analyzing their business moves, even decoding their interviews like hidden messages. One clip in particular, Christian smiling while saying, "My dad taught me how to move smart in any room," is now being reposted with captions like, "Smart in what way?" On TikTok, content creators began building full timelines of Justin and Christian's appearances, pinpointing every suspicious overlap between them and major Diddy-related controversies. Twitter threads dissected their sudden disappearances from social media following the raids Reddit users compiled. Eerie similarities in how both sons handled press compared to their father, media trained emotionally distant and evasive when asked personal questions. And the question on everyone's mind were, they just caught in the crossfire, or were they fully briefed? One former stylist even went viral for posting anonymously that Christian was always treated like a junior exec, never like a client. She claimed he showed up to fittings with notes from Diddy's team and signed off on what photographers could and couldn't capture. That's not typical for a rising artist. That's calculated, but it didn't stop there. An old interview resurfaced from years ago where Justin proudly said, "I'm learning the business side from my dad. I don't just want to be rich, I want to run it." At the time, it came off as typical ambition. Now it reads like foreshadowing, and that's the twist. Because this isn't just about whether Diddy was training his sons, it's about whether the public already knew, but ignored the signs, because the family looked successful, stylish, and untouchable. Now that the veil is lifting, people are turning faster than ever. Fashion brands are distancing. Podcast hosts who once praised the Combs boys are reevaluating. Even industry friends are going radio silent, refusing to speak their names in interviews. It's like the world collectively woke up and realized maybe they weren't just witnesses. Maybe they were apprentices in the making, and what they might have been trusted with could change everything. Because as more courtroom details emerge, the role of Diddy's sons could go from speculation to spotlight, and what happens next might put them face to face with questions they were never supposed to answer as the trial progresses more. Testimonies are expected to unveil the complexities of Diddy's personal and professional life. The involvement of his sons could have legal ramifications, depending on the evidence presented. The unfolding trial of Sean Diddy. Combs not only exposes alleged personal transgressions, but also raises questions about legacy, influence, and the potential grooming of successors as testimonies continue. The world watches, awaiting the truth behind the facade of fame and fortune.